A talking fish, a CIA agent, and an alien disguised as Anne Hathaway. No, this isn't the opening line to a joke, it's the most patriotic sitcom known to man. That's right, folks. Today we're covering the story of American Dad. This story follows the hilarious lives of CIA agent Stan Smith and his dysfunctional family, his wife Francine and his kids Haley and Steve. And trust me, even in a family with an Area 51 escapee and a fish that used to be an Olympic gold medalist, the humans are usually the weird ones. Without further ado, let's get right into it. The pilot begins with an average Smith family morning. This includes Haley and Steve bickering at the kitchen table, Klaus catcalling Francine, Roger complaining about existing, and Stan shooting up the toaster. Stan explains that the CIA is labeled today as in the red for activity, meaning that something, somewhere, some way is going to happen. Haley scoffs at this, voicing her disapproval of the CIA and their tendency to petrify the general public daily just to claim control over their lives. Stan ignores her and turns his attention to Steve, who claims he's going to ask out a popular cheerleader today at school. Stan begins reminiscing about his own high school days and starts making out Francine right in front of Klaus, seemingly on purpose, as Klaus is pretty vocal about wanting Francine for himself.
You and I are meant to be happy hour!
Later that day, Steve attempts to ask out the cheerleader, but is publicly humiliated after she punches him in the face. On his walk home, he observes a woman complimenting a man's dog, which leads her to go back to his place. When Steve returns home, he asks for a dog, promising his dad it's because he wants more responsibility, which one day will help him join the military. Stan happily agrees, then picks out a 19-year-old dog because it was alive during the Reagan administration. In Steve's eyes, the dog seems to work. A girl yells at him from across the street. Steve's glimmer of hope is destroyed when Stan accidentally shoots the dog in the middle of the night because he thought it was an intruder. Steve sadly proclaims his loss of love, which alerts Stan to the real issue. Stan tries multiple tactics to help Steve, such as pretending to be a robber or straight up kidnapping women. Both of these tactics obviously backfire and fail Steve, so Stan resorts to something he claims he's best at as a CIA agent, rigging Steve's school election to give him a sense of power. Stan's plan actually works. Steve starts dating the cheerleader, but his bubble bursts when she refuses to kiss him. She reveals she only wanted the perks of dating the student body president and would never actually kiss him. Frustrated and betrayed, Steve abuses his power, barricading himself inside the school.
Oh God, he's gay. This is it. This is the gay call. I've been ready for this for years.
No.
The principal calls Stan to explain the situation, prompting Stan to break into the school and retrieve Steve. Inside, they have a father-son bonding moment where Stan shows Steve a photo of himself in high school. And he looks just as ugly as Steve. Steve feels better, but is unsure how he'll face the cheerleader again. The episode ends with Stan deporting the cheerleaders that Steve never has to see her again. It helps to have family in high places, I guess. This next episode, Francine's flashback, begins with Francine waking up to greet Stan for their anniversary. Stan doesn't realize this though, and leaves for his annual CIA fishing trip, which he specifically planned to stay at all day in order to avoid Francine. He remembers their anniversary as the anniversary of the biggest fight that they've ever been in. It's only when his coworkers ask what the fight was about that he realizes what he's done.
Oh, I forgot our anniversary. I'm never gonna do that again.
Stan rushes home, but he's way too late. Upon arriving, Francine flings a frying pan at his head and ignores his apologies. In order to salvage the marriage, Stan decides to put Francine into a chemically induced sleep. He takes her to the CIA to wipe her last 20 hours of memory so he can relive the day again. The super qualified CIA scientist makes a stupid mistake, accidentally turning the wrong knob on the machine and wipes her memory for the past 20 years instead. He then explains that there's no way to tell her what's happened without putting her in grave danger, as the human mind can't comprehend something that big. Meanwhile, Haley turns down her clingy boyfriend Jeff when he invites her to the annual Burning Man festival, claiming that it's actually just for losers. She's then bombarded by her father, who's in great distress over the Francine situation. Stan explains to Haley that they're going to have to pretend that her mother is a teenager in order for her brain not to explode, and that Haley is going to have to pretend to be her roommate to keep an eye on her. The two brainstorm how to reawaken Francine's memories. Haley suggests that Stan do what he did the first time that they fell in love, which apparently involves Stan killing an animal to put it out of its misery. Something Francine had once said was the most merciful thing that she'd ever seen. Awkwardly, when Stan tries to do this again, he doesn't find an animal close to death and ends up just looking like a crazy guy trying to kill animals. This doesn't attract Francine in the slightest, and she leaves immediately. Later, we find out that Francine accepted Jeff's invitation to Burning Man. Haley and Stan rush over to find their significant others, and Haley is impressed with Jeff's ability to win her back, and the two make up, and they make out. Stan finds Francine as she's on stage chugging alcohol. He tries to talk to her again, but to no avail.
Please remember.
It's only when he saves her from the literal burning man and kisses her, mimicking true love's kiss, that she remembers. Oh, and the magic of raccoons also help, I guess. The episode Bulocks to Stan begins with us learning of Stan's desire for a CIA promotion. Unfortunately, his boss, Bullock, seems less than interested in giving it to him. Meanwhile, Haley breaks up with her boyfriend Jeff while on a hike, saying that he never challenges her. Later that day, the Smith family attends the annual CIA fair so Stan can appear more involved in work-related activities. Haley and Bullock end up in a heated argument, as Haley greatly dislikes everything to do with the American government. Stan is incredibly upset that his daughter may have jeopardized his rapport with Bullock. The next morning, when he arrives at Bullock's house, he's greeted not only by Bullock, but also by Haley, wearing a robe and holding a coffee. I think that it's Stan who now needs to wipe 20 hours of his memory. Haley explains that they met up for coffee so Bullock could apologize, and they ended up actually hitting it off. Stan reluctantly lets it go in hopes of getting closer to Bullock. Secretly on the side, Stan trains Jeff to become a real man in order to win Haley back. His training methods include full-body physical harm and electrocution. Oh my god. This continues right up until Stan is on the verge of getting his promotion. Or at least, he almost gets it. Just when Bullock is about to officially award Stan, Haley calls Bullock to break up. It means Stan's plan has worked just a little too soon. Desperate to salvage the promotion, Stan begs Bullock for instructions on what to do. Bullock tells him to murder Jeff. Stan inevitably fails, as Jeff escapes after Stan decides to give him a 30-second head start before being shot, allowing Jeff to drive away in the van that they took to the woods. Haley intervenes when Bullock tries to kill Jeff himself, prompting Bullock to call Haley a cheap slut. This sends Stan into a rage. He goes absolutely apeshit on Bullock, beating the life out of him. To save his own life, Bullock promotes Stan on the spot, claiming the entire situation was staged as a test of Stan's loyalty.
Stand up and take a bow, Jeff. Brilliant!
A new player appears in the episode Con Air, when Stan's real father comes for a surprise visit. And no, not that one. That one, is dead. While at the funeral, Stan's real father shows up jumping from a helicopter. Stan explains to the family that the grandpa they've grown up knowing and loving has never been their real grandfather. Stan reveals he's had a fake dad for 30 years ever since his wedding. He picked up a random man from a local Home Depot and kept him around to cover for his real dad. Later in the episode, Stan's real father announces that he's retiring and wants Stan to follow in his footsteps, but only after Stan proves himself by assisting on one last mission. Meanwhile, the FBI shows up asking Francine if she's seen a man who looks just like her father-in-law. They're searching for him because he's a national jewel thief. Francine says no. Stan's dad doesn't have a mustache, but later finds a mustache hidden in a suitcase. She confronts him, but instead of owning up, he drugs her and ships her out of the house. When Francine returns, she tries to warn Stan, but he electrocutes her, believing his father's lie that she's working for the other side. Stan then locks her in a glass jail cell in the basement. Wow, this is really giving some serious You vibes.
I was destined for greatness until you tricked me into having this loving family.
Stan's father-son bonding quickly unravels when Stan realizes the true nature of his dad's criminal tendencies. After a brief brawl, Stan chooses to let his father go free, unable to bring himself to turn him in. The episode ends with Stan going to release Francine and accidentally locking himself inside her jail cell instead. In the episode Star Trek, the Smith parents find out that Steve is failing English. Stan visits Steve's teacher's house to figure out why, only to discover that Steve's Japanese friend has been doing all of his homework in Japanese.
Go ahead, Eric, be a hero. That's what I thought.
Stan, frustrated, reveals that he's written 3,012 children's books himself, but none of them have ever been published. This gives Steve an idea. He'll write a book about Roger. And unlike Stan, he actually gets it published. Steve becomes semi-popular, with about 7 people showing up to his book signing. Stan takes Steve to meet with his publisher to explore how they can boost the popularity. The publisher explains that Steve needs a hook, so Stan decides to turn Steve into the bad boy of children's books. The plan actually works. Steve becomes famous, but it quickly becomes too much. Steve doesn't want to keep up the act, but his parents insist that he must. Feeling trapped, Steve hires a manager to divorce his own parents. Well, that's one way to escape. With his newfound freedom, Steve buys a mansion and fills it with all of his favorite things. His chum room, some girl-on-girl action, and of course a pool full of Jell-O. But Roger bursts his bubble, showing up to enjoy the perks Steve has reaped. Unfortunately, Roger has a sinister plan to murder Steve. He seemingly succeeds, pushing Steve into the pool of Jell-O and drowning him. But surprise, it actually wasn't Steve. It was an actor hired to play him in an upcoming movie. Steve's manager dips immediately after seeing the body, claiming that Steve's career is over and he wants no part of it. When Roger realizes that Steve is still alive, he's instantly relieved as he hadn't actually intended to commit murder.
So this is all your fault!
Oh yeah, blame the alien. The cops will eat that up.
The episode ends with Steve realizing how much he misses his family. He reconnects with them, and together they spend the entire afternoon disposing of the body, shoving it into a lake as one united front. This episode, Finances with Wolves, begins with Francine sharing her lifelong dream, owning a kiosk at the mall. Back in her 20s, she would hook up with men she thought could help fund her dream, but none ever really followed through. She assumes Dan will help now, especially since he just received a $20,000 bonus at work.
I'm gonna wear my money suit to your grand opening when you find that someone who believes in you.
However, Francine severely overestimates the man that she married. Not only does Stan refuse to help, but he also proudly shows off the useless junk that he bought with the money instead. Fed up, Francine takes the money anyway, and her kiosk becomes an instant success. But Francine's success brings a new problem. She no longer has time to be the stay-at-home wife and mom that she's always been. That means no more cooking for Stan, and this becomes a problem. Faced with a tough choice, order Chinese takeout or bring back Klaus's human body so he can cook, Stan chooses the latter, which is a decision that he will soon regret. What Stan doesn't anticipate is that Klaus, now back in human form, has one very specific goal: to sleep with Stan's wife, and he nearly succeeds. In the end, some radicalized tree activist decides to blow up a statue at the mall, which puts Francine in danger. So Stan sacrifices his own body to save Francine from being crushed by the statue. He makes it out alive too, thanks to his massive necklace. Francine witnesses Stan's selfless act and is reminded of how much he truly does care for her, and the couple is back on good terms. Klaus, meanwhile, is devastated. His new body's ruined. He has to go back to being a goldfish. Wow. Bummer. We kick off the episode of Ice and Men with some marital tension. Francine begs Stan for companionship, pleading, "Please, not again this year." But Stan is dead set on, whatever mysterious thing he does every winter. Francine explains that every year, Stan becomes distant, leaving all day and coming home cold, quiet, and unhappy.
Where have you been?
Sorry, that's for me to know and you to find out.
But this year is different. Francine stumbles upon Stan's secret lair, only to discover a full-blown ice skating rink. Yeah, Stan is shown figure skating alone, performing beautiful formations while looking emo as hell. Francine confronts him, and Stan finally explains, long ago, he used to skate competitively, but everything changed after he pushed his partner too far, endangering her life just to win. Ever since, Stan has chosen to skate alone, with his new companion, loneliness. Wow, very dramatic. Francine calls that nonsense and insists that they actually should skate together. Stan reluctantly agrees and slowly begins to find joy again in something he thought he had to leave behind. Everything's going well until Francine signs them up for an ice dancing competition.
Damn it, Francine, what's so hard about doing it flawlessly the first time?
Stan's competitive nature kicks in, and he ditches Francine to skate with Roger instead. Unfortunately for Stan, Roger is even more competitive than he is. After realizing how horribly he treated Francine, Stan decides to make it right. He drugs her and has her wake up in the middle of the skating rink ready to compete. Francine, rightfully so, is mad and tries hitting Stan, but he apologizes while he dodges her attacks, and it ends up being a really impressive skating routine. Francine forgives him, and Stan says he doesn't care about the competition. Being with Francine means that he's already won. Stan's world is shattered in When a Stan Loves a Woman, when he finds out just how many people Francine has slept with in the past. Francine insists that sex without love is meaningless, and that Stan is the only one who matters because he was her last. But Stan can't shake the mental image. It starts to strain their relationship. Not only can Stan no longer get aroused when Francine wants to be intimate, he can't even stomach being touched by her. The issue's so serious that Francine proposes something drastic. Stan should go out and have meaningless sex with somebody just to see how empty it really is. Stan is reluctant, even going so far as to revoke their marriage vows since he can't break a vow.
Ha! Couldn't rise to the occasion, not even a little.
Now, Stan heads out. He meets somebody. Instead of just sleeping with her, he actually starts dating her. This devastates Francine, who only agreed to do a one-night stand, not a full-blown relationship. She stays quiet, hoping Stan will snap out of it soon. But things get worse. Stan and this woman get married. Yeah, actual wedding bells. Francine is appalled, confused, and completely powerless to stop it. She never imagined it would go this far. On his honeymoon night, Stan has a revelation. This feels empty. All he can think about is Francine. He realizes that love, not is what gives things meaning. He divorces his new wife and returns to Francine, who should absolutely be making him sleep on the couch for the entire foreseeable future. The episode Big Trouble in Little Langley is perfectly named, because Francine's parents are in town and they're here to party. Well, more like to completely transform the Smith house into a traditional Chinese household. Stan is not a fan of their visits. Fed up with the whole situation, Stan tells Francine she should just go find her real biological parents so they don't have to host her adoptive ones anymore.
你知道 Stan ใช่吗?
What'd you say? You just said my name. You tried to bury it in your China talk, but I heard it.
Francine is deeply offended. She believes that her adoptive parents are her real parents, because after all, they chose her and raised her as their own. But of course, that completely goes over Stan's head, because if you couldn't tell, he's a bad person. And also, maybe kinda racist. Without her knowledge, Stan takes matters into his own hands and tracks down Francine's birth parents. And jackpot, they're rich. Stan immediately hits it off with them and eagerly inserts himself into their lives. But things get tricky when they ask to meet Francine in person.
But we should probably meet Francine.
Who's that now?
Our daughter?
Panicked, Stan asks Francine how she would feel if he hypothetically found her birth parents behind her back. Let's just say her answer involves Stan being dead. Undeterred, Stan continues scheming. He needs a reason for Francine to distrust her adoptive parents. And he finds it. Their will. Turns out they're leaving everything to Gwen, their biological daughter, and nothing to Francine. Heartbroken, Francine agrees to meet her birth parents. But something seems off. Klaus is immediately suspicious and demands Stan ask the real reason Francine was given up. What follows is a horrifying memory bubble. It was a sunny day in paradise. Her birth parents were boarding a plane, but weren't allowed to bring a baby into first class. Rather than sit and coach, they just handed off their baby, Francine, to the nearest person and asked if they could get rid of this. Klaus is horrified and tries to warn Francine. Just then, the house catches on fire. Stan is pinned under a burning log, and Francine's biological dad decides not to help because of insurance liability. Thankfully, the Lings arrive just in time and save Stan instead. They later explain that they gave everything to Gwen in the will because Gwen is alone and kind of dumb, while Francine is intelligent and has a full support system. The episode ends with Francine asking where her real parents are, and Stan smiling as he points her right back to the Lings. So this is the episode where Stan Smith bites the dust. R.I.P. Just kidding. Or am I? In The Most Adequate Christmas, after Stan freezes to death while searching for the perfect Christmas tree, he ends up in limbo. Desperate for a second chance at life, Stan is told he must plead his case in court.
Looks like you got Michelle.
Whoa!
Unfortunately, he's assigned the world's worst lawyer. Michelle does her best, but it's pretty hard to defend Stan. Over and over again, the court has shown memories that prove Stan doesn't actually deserve to return. One especially brutal clip features him insisting that the doctors are wrong about Francine's due date, dragging her on an Africa vacation while she's very pregnant, and then ignoring her when her water breaks. She ends up giving birth with a monkey as her only help. Back in court, Michelle accidentally lets it slip that Stan's entire family is about to freeze to death, because he left them stranded in the wilderness without the car keys. This news breaks Stan. He snaps, pulls a heaven gun, and starts blasting angels. Then he storms straight to God's office. In the most un-Stan move ever, he pulls a gun on God. God, unfazed, demands Stan put the gun down. And for once, Stan listens. He apologizes. He walks away. That single moment of humility is all God needed to see. Stan is granted a second chance at life. Before heading back, Stan asks for one last favor, for Michelle to receive her angel wings. And God obliges. The episode ends with Stan back at home, reunited with the Smiths, ready to spend Christmas together. In the episode Office Spaceman, narcissistic Roger is at it again, this time selling photos of himself to the local newspaper just to get some attention, and a little extra cash. Unfortunately for him, those photos caught the attention of the CIA. They show them to Stan and claim that they're getting closer than ever to catching the alien that they've been hunting down. Stan recognizes the danger immediately and confronts Roger, warning him to stop before it's too late. But of course, Roger doesn't really listen. He keeps submitting photos and is eventually captured while inside the newspaper office. Luckily, his disguises are so ridiculous that the CIA doesn't recognize him as the alien. They just think he's a guy who keeps getting close to it. Stan demands Roger lay low, go off the grid, stop drawing attention. Roger agrees until he learns about the perks of working with the CIA. They give him his own office and unlimited money as long as he keeps pretending to get closer to the alien. Naturally, Roger decides to ride this out, and occasionally he keeps the con going by submitting more fake photos of himself. But Bullock grows suspicious. He's confused how Roger is spending so much money, getting so close to the alien and still turning up nothing. So Roger decides to take it further. He collects his own goo and turns it in as evidence. Unfortunately, he leaves the rest of the goo in the CIA bathroom. Oop. It's full of his DNA, prompting Bullock to order a full agency lockdown and a sweep. Cornered, Roger goes nuclear. He blames Stan, claiming that the alien has infiltrated Stan's body as a disguise. Stan plays along. When Roger enters the room to investigate, he confides in Stan and admits the whole operation's gotten way out of hand.
Not bad.
Stan assures Roger that everything will be fine if he just gets undressed and opens the CIA's main doors. Roger hesitantly agrees, placing his entire life in Stan's hands. He walks into the center of the room, and Stan punches him out cold. But just when it looks like Roger's toast, Stan does actually come through. He gasses the entire building, including himself, to give Roger time to escape. The episode ends with Roger slipping out of the CIA just in time, thanks to the only guy insane enough to risk everything for him. In the following episode, One Little Word, Stan is really jealous of this one colleague of his at work. Why? Because he's Bullock's #1, and Stan wishes that he could be like that too. Well, watch what you wish for, because Stan gets his opportunity later that night when Bullock comes by to ask for his help on some mission. The boss dumps his baby off on Francine too, which is really not cool. And it gets even less cool when it's revealed that the mission was just Stan helping his boss find a girl that will both date him and take care of his kid. They look everywhere, but they just don't find the girl. So Stan decides to take drastic measures and attempts to rescue Bullock's wife, who's been trapped by terrorists in Fallujah. So Stan saves her, only to realize that she's been brainwashed and is a terrorist.
Miriam!
Die, American infidel!
Seeing this, Bullock just kinda dips, leaving Stan and Francine with his kid and his wife. That's just wrong. The Smith household is now a complete mess, and Francine begs Stan to tell Bullock to take his family back. But Stan is having too much fun being his #1 and decides not to say anything. Well, that is until Bullock's wife Miriam kidnaps his kid. She comes to her senses though, and Bullock takes his wife and child home. All is well, except for the fact that he was sleeping with some random girl and now she needs a place to stay, meaning now Bullock's mistress is living at their place. Francine is mad. They're supposed to have a romantic getaway this weekend, so Stan says he'll say no to Bullock and focus on his wife the entire weekend. So naturally, he brings the mistress along and keeps her in a nearby cabin, spending the entire weekend catering to her needs. Francine is pissed when she finds out and is about to leave, until a scheme by Roger makes Miriam shoot Bullock in the foot and take the baby away. Bullock asks Stan for help, but he's done being his boss's pet. He's gonna spend some time with his wife. Great husband, terrible person. In the episode, Pulling Double Booty, we finally learn about Haley's violent tendencies. After Jeff breaks up with her, Stan immediately panics and rushes to the scene. Apparently, ever since Haley was a child, she hasn't been able to emotionally handle rejection. And when Stan gets to the mall, it is chaos. People are fleeing as if there's a zombie apocalypse. Inside, we get a full-blown Godzilla scene. Haley is on top of a tower screaming like a monster. The Smiths eventually manage to get her home safely, because thankfully she didn't end up in jail. But Stan is still worried. The next day, he straight up shoots a random man who flirts with Haley. He warns her that the next boy she dates must be somebody that she wants to marry, or she's going to end up in the doghouse for life. Annoyed, Haley goes behind Stan's back and starts dating his stunt double, Bill. Francine finds Haley kissing who she thinks is Stan and immediately faints. Things don't get better when she realizes that it's not Stan. It's a man who looks exactly like him. She understandably calls it incredibly weird. Stan, on the other hand, loves the idea, saying it's perfect that Haley is with somebody who resembles him. That is, until Bill makes a move on Francine. He tries to sleep with her, pretending to be Stan. Furious, Stan throws Bill out and threatens to kill him if he ever comes back. But Haley doesn't know any of this. Rather than risk another one of her violent tantrums, Stan decides to impersonate Bill and go with Haley on a romantic weekend trip. Wow, things are getting weird.
I'm gonna go down to the gift shop. See you at dinner.
During the trip, Haley opens up to who she thinks is Bill, saying she doesn't believe her dad actually loves her. She talks about how he's never said it, never shown it, and how she always felt emotionally distant from him. Moved, Stan finally confesses his love, still in character. He tells her how he used to put candy in her mouth while she slept so she'd have sweet dreams, and how he kisses a photo of her before every mission for good luck. Haley softens. She decides to call Stan, and Stan panics. He breaks up with her as Bill, but nothing happens. No outburst, no chaos. Turns out, Haley's explosive reactions weren't about heartbreak. They're about never feeling loved by the one man who should have told her earlier. The episode ends with Haley realizing she's been with her dad the whole time. And then, setting the forest on fire. The next episode, Chimdale, opens with a devastating realization for Steve. He has scoliosis. That's not the bad part. The bad part is the back support that he has to wear. While Roger, Francine, and Haley leave to enjoy a free week at the spa, Steve is super embarrassed by his back brace. Says he doesn't want to go to school.
Wait, how are you gonna go to the bathroom? I know, I'll just insert a catheter.
Stan convinces him to go, saying it's what's on the inside that matters. But Stan has clearly never met high schoolers. Every single person treats Steve like even his own friend Snot. Meanwhile, we learn that Roger only won 2 tickets to the spa, so Haley has to hide in his suitcase. Back with Steve, he comes home to show his dad how mean the kids were to him, only to find Stan blow-drying his toupee. Stan is completely bald. Stan says all that beauty on the inside stuff is completely just nonsense. That Francine can never know that he's bald, she'll lose all interest in him. While this is happening, Roger and the others have a problem. The spa detective might be onto their little scheme. The next day, Stan tries connecting with Steve, but his son is done with his hypocrisy. So the next day, Stan decides to go to the office bald so Steve can have the confidence to be himself. Unfortunately, turns out adults are no better than kids, because Stan gets absolutely torched by his colleagues for being bald. In fact, it's so bad that when Steve comes to visit his dad the next day, he sees Stan wearing his toupee. The man folded immediately. Stan wakes up the following morning to a call from Steve, who's on his way to the spa to tell Francine that he's bald, and he took Stan's wig as proof. Stan gives chase, only to realize Steve was hiding in his car the whole time. He eventually catches Steve and gets his hair back, but when he sees how disappointed his son is, he takes his wig off and confesses his baldness to Francine, who, of course, already knew. So did Roger. So did Haley. The guy was stressed over nothing. The episode Roy Rogers McFreely kicks off with Stan and Steve enjoying the synchronization of the sprinklers in their neighborhood, until Stan sees an above-ground sprinkler. He brings it up in the homeowners association meeting, who proceed to ban all above-ground sprinklers. They ask Stan to come back as their chairman, and he refuses. But when Stan doesn't get Roger a bottle of grenadine from the store, Roger dresses up as a man named Roy Rogers McFreely and becomes the homeowners chairman. He has one thing on the agenda: make Stan's life a living hell. His first orders of business is putting a fire hydrant in front of their home, which means his car is going to get towed. Let the pettiness begin. You see, Stan believes that systems like the Homeowners Association work, but Roger is doing his best to kill that belief. Late night trash pickups, motion sensor lights, he really does everything to make sure that Stan's life is hell. And when Stan brings it up in the next Homeowners Association meeting and asks them to overturn those decisions, they just shut him down. As Haley puts it looks like Stan's beloved systems might not be so perfect after all. Seeing his neighborhood turn into a mess, Stan finally gives in and joins Haley as a part of counterculture. Together, they gather up everybody affected by Roger's new policies, and they decide to take action. So at night, they go around the neighborhood and do some constructive vandalism, perfectly trimming hedges, installing fences, repainting houses, the whole 9 yards.
Power to the people!
Dad, that's still a little hairy.
Roger wakes up to see the neighborhood looking normal, and he just can't have that, so he conspires with his buddies again. Unfortunately, he gets cornered by Stan and the counterculture, and they start chasing him around town. He manages to give the others the drop, but Haley and Stan catch him. Stan says he needs to resign, but Roger says all he wants is a say in the house. Realizing that the way he feels now is how Roger always feels at home, Stan agrees. He'll bring Roger as much grenadine as he likes. And just like that, peace is restored for now. The next episode, Rapturs Delight, starts with Stan and the family going to church on Christmas. On the way there, Stan explains the rapture to Roger, and he laughs his ass off. There's no way that's real. When they make it to church, Francine takes Stan into an empty room for some naughty business. But when they come out, they realize that everybody's now naked and floating up to heaven. The rapture is real, and Stan, Francine, and Roger have been left behind. Stan is depressed, till he hears about the second coming of Jesus on TV. He goes to Jesus and begs to get raptured. He's even willing to leave Francine behind.
Stan Smith? Go to heaven!
Unfortunately for him, the Jesus he met was just kind of a weirdo, whereas Francine met the real Jesus who asked her to be his girlfriend during his upcoming war against the Antichrist. Not only did Stan not get raptured, he also got dumped. Talk about a rough week. One time skip later, the war against the Antichrist has turned the world into a Mad Max hellscape. Jesus makes his way across New Denver and finds Stan in a bar. Stan wants nothing to do with him, but Jesus needs Stan's help. The Antichrist has captured Francine together. They head over to Roger and use the spaceship to break into the Antichrist HQ, getting ready to kick some demon butt. Stan and Jesus make it to the Antichrist lair, where they free Francine before facing off with the Antichrist, who just kinda looks like a huge nerd. During their fight, the Antichrist shoots at Francine, so Stan jumps in front of her and takes the bullet. With a bomb set to blow the whole place up, Stan apologizes to Francine and asks Jesus to take her to safety before he bites the dust. Now in heaven, Stan makes his way to his personalized heaven, what his heart desires the most, and it's just him, back at home with his family. At the end of the day, that's what Stan wanted the most. I remember the first time I saw this episode, I was really surprised at such a insane premise for a sitcom, cartoon. I was really surprised that I was touched by this ending. Anyway, moving on. The episode A Jones for a Smith opens as usual, with Stan having a problem with something perfectly fine. This time, it's welfare. Stan hates the idea of helping people. As he puts it, you gotta help yourself. To hammer this point home, he doesn't help Steve with his homework, doesn't help Haley when she's choking on some food, oh my god, and he doesn't bail Francine out when she gets arrested for drunk driving. But when that leads to Francine getting sentenced to community service via pouring soup at the soup kitchen, Stan hates that too. Brother deeply needs therapy. Stan heads over to the soup kitchen and steals Francine's soup. He's a cold, and he wants the soup to make it better, after he somehow gets tricked by a stranger into smoking crack. Don't remember the doctor prescribing that the last time I had a cold.
No need, pal. First time's free.
Woo!
Stan thinks that it's cold medicine. He starts using it regularly, helps him destroy an obstacle course at work, and everything's looking pretty great. Meanwhile, Steve is studying with a girl from school who totally has the hots for him. Her dad walks in and gives Steve his blessing, but says he has to meet Steve's parents first. Meanwhile, Roger helps Stan realize that he's been smoking crack, so Stan says he's quitting it immediately. He's never doing it again. Unfortunately, that's not really how that works. He's totally addicted, so he goes right back to it. He empties his accounts, sells Francine's jewelry and the TV, and goes on a 3-day crack bender. When he comes back, he realizes they have to go to Steve's girlfriend's house for dinner. But while they're there, Stan makes an absolute embarrassment of himself, ruining Steve's chances with the girl. Getting crack blocked by your dad is just a whole new level of pain. Stan realizes that he has a problem, but refuses to take help from anybody in the family. He decides to lock himself up for 48 hours and breaks out immediately in search for crack. Oh my god. He invades Craig and Terry's home, stealing stuff that he can sell. When the police show up, he takes them hostage. The hostage negotiator then shows up, and he is terrible at his job. He gives Stan a free plane to Colombia without Stan even asking for it. So Stan hops in and flies off, leaving his family behind. It takes a group mugging in Colombia for Stan to realize that taking up from others doesn't make you weaker. It actually makes you stronger. So he goes back home, checks into rehab, and kicks the crack addiction for good. Everybody's happy. Except for Steve, who's never going to forgive his dad for ruining his chances with that girl. And, I don't blame him. This episode, Cops and Roger, that's a good title, starts with Francine and Roger deciding to go shopping bright and early. It's a Memorial Day sale, and they're trying to beat the crowds. Unfortunately, Francine gets mugged, and Roger doesn't do anything to help her. Stan tears into him for being weak, and Roger says that he's right. So Roger begins getting rid of all of his costumes, because he's not fit to be a man anymore. Tired of being weak, Roger decides to join the police academy, thinking that it's going to tough him up and turn him into a man. But Stan says that he's never going to make it, and it looks like he was right, because Roger sucks at everything police-related. Basically, if it's got anything to do with being a cop, Roger sucks at it. Realizing that he can't do this himself, Roger begs Stan to help him get through the academy, and Stan agrees. Cue the training montage, which turns Roger from a crying wimp into a total badass. He graduates from the academy, and Stan is so proud of him, until he finds out Roger turned him into a dirty cop. Took him a total of 3 hours to do it. Stan is surprised, but I'm not.
I'm taking a cut of everything that comes through here. These are my ducks now.
Stan tries convincing Roger to stop, because what he's doing is wrong. But Roger doesn't care. A dirty cop named Chaz has helped Roger see true power. For the first time in his life, he's not a pushover, and he loves it. So Stan has no choice. He puts together a file on Roger's illegal activities and makes his way to Bullock. But even though it's the right thing to do, Stan doesn't turn Roger in. He says Roger is a good man, that true strength is not abusing the power that you have. Unfortunately for Stan, he gets captured by Chaz. Chaz wants Roger to finish his buddy off, but he refuses. He takes out Chaz instead. Looks like Roger is not so bad after all. The episode Bully for Steve starts with Stan realizing something horrifying. His son is a wimp. I mean, the only question here is, how is he finding this out just now? He tails Steve all day, seeing him checking out at every confrontation and giving up whenever he faces any kind of trouble. Stan tries convincing his son through a metaphor, but it doesn't really work. Steve just doesn't want any trouble. So Stan decides to take matters into his own hands by turning into Steve's bully. He beats him up, steals his bike, and forces Steve to fight back and stand up for himself.
How did you deal with Stelio?
Good story. He moved away.
But no matter what he does, Steve doesn't fight back. It's like the kid is just not cut out for confrontation. Steve tries reasoning with bully Stan, but he's not having it. The bullying gets so bad that the principal calls Francine and Stan to school. Steve doesn't want to tell them who his bully is, so the principal pulls up the school cameras and they find out that it's Stan. He runs from Francine, but she T-bones his car and demands that he stop bullying Steve. But Stan says he's going to keep doing it until Steve fights back, which infuriates Francine. Francine tries training Steve to fight back against Stan and gives up 2 hours later. He's hopeless. He just doesn't want to fight his dad. Steve dresses up as an old lady to avoid his dad, but it's useless. Stan finds him anyway. But Steve has finally had enough. He says they're settling this once and for all tomorrow at the school playground. At the playground, Stan gets ready to fight Steve. But Steve isn't fighting Stan himself. Turns out he tracked down Stan's high school bully, Stelio Cantos, and he begins beating Stan's ass. He whoops him and whoops him until Stan is black and blue and is forced to surrender. Afterwards, although Steve didn't do it the way that Stan wanted, he overcame his bully in his own way, and Stan respects it. I can't decide whether that's beautiful or messed up. Probably a bit of both. I've just got that Stelio Cantos theme stuck in my head. It's awesome. The episode 180 opens with Jeff singing outside the Smith household, hoping to get Haley back. Unfortunately, Francine and Stan bully him, calling him a loser and telling him to get lost. This is when Koala Reginald, another one of Haley's exes, sees Jeff crying and says the best thing he can do now is to give her some space. So Jeff decides to do the exact opposite and meet Haley at school. He proposes to her, and she actually agrees. They decide to elope, and Haley leaves her parents a note. They're marrying at sunset, so Stan and Francine head out to find and stop them. There's a tracking chip being planted in Haley, which crosses so many boundaries, only to find she put the chip inside of a dog. With no other option, Stan puts a $50K bounty on anyone who can stop their marriage. One of the people who decide to chase this bounty is Reggie, who turns around his car and makes his way to stop Haley and Jeff. Meanwhile, Haley realizes Jeff is a loser. His plan for the future is a total bust. Jeff then turns on the TV and realizes that there is a bounty on them. Among the people joining the bounty hunt is also Principal Lewis.
I'm a molder of young minds. Shoulder jab!
Meanwhile, Reggie was chauffeuring Bullock, who starts talking smack about Haley, so he parks the car and they start fighting. Steve and Roger also join the bounty hunt, only for Roger to get high and completely derail their chase. Classic Roger. Stan and Francine are still looking for their daughter when they get a call from Jeff. He's calling to claim the bounty. He says if they give him the $50K, he'll leave Haley. The Smiths agree and give him the money, calling him a loser for abandoning their daughter. While Reggie and Bullock are still fighting, all the bounty hunters find Haley and are fighting over the reward. This is when Stan and Francine arrive and tell everybody the bounty was already claimed by Jeff. Haley's devastated and goes to get her things, but it was all a ruse. Haley and Jeff have planned to collect the bounty and escape together, and that's exactly what they do. But Stan and Francine aren't mad. Looks like they underestimated their new son-in-law. In the next episode, Son of Stan, Francine and Stan are super sad. After all, their daughter ran off with a hippie. Roger sees them and says he's going after Haley, but not because he wants to get her back. He's going after the money. Meanwhile, Francine and Stan start arguing about each other's parenting style. Stan says that Haley left because Francine was too lenient, while she says Haley left because Stan was too harsh. So, to decide who gets to raise Steve by their principles, they have a BMX race. Unfortunately for Stan, he falls down, breaks multiple bones, and loses immediately. Looks like Steve is going to be raised by Francine's rules. Meanwhile, Roger smokes pot to get in the same headspace as Jeff and track him down. It actually works too. He somehow ends up in Thailand right in front of Jeff and Haley. Meanwhile, Stan does what is possibly the most unhinged thing that I've ever seen. Since Francine gets to raise Steve, he clones his son so that he can raise the clone his own way and names him Steve Areno. Back in Thailand, Roger starts annoying Haley and Jeff with a super annoying noise with the goal of annoying them into handing over the money. Later, the parent-off begins, as Francine and Stan implement their parenting styles. Stan's hardcore studying and training methods turn Steve Areno into a straight-up jock, while Francine's coddling turns Steve into a massive loser.
It's the Spanky Award.
Meanwhile, Roger starts chasing Haley and Jeff and keeps making his annoying noise. No matter what they do, they can't get away from him. They even go to China, but Roger manages to find them. So they give him the money, or rather what's left of it. It's gone since they spent it all running away. Back at the Smith household, Steve Areno gets tired of Stan's rules and runs away. Francine says that Stan's lost since his parenting pushed Steve Areno away, but it turns out that Steve Areno actually disguised himself as Steve so he could enjoy his chill life. And he's locked the real Steve up somewhere. The clone runs away, and Francine and Stan chase him. The Smiths find Steve locked up in an abandoned building where Steve Areno tries to kill him. Stan fights the clone off and throws him out of the window. They save Steve.
About time. It's 4 o'clock. Where are my 4 o'clock nachos?
But Steve Areno is still alive. So Stan blows up a tanker behind him, leaving him for dead. While it looks like he's about to survive, a cat grabs the gun and kills Steve Areno. Yikes. The next episode, Stan's food restaurant sees Stan and Francine go to a restaurant, and Stan hates it. This is nothing new though. He hates every restaurant, and that's because none of them can compare to that one restaurant he went to as a kid after his father left him. Unfortunately, that restaurant then blew up, so Stan never got to go there again. Hearing this, Francine says he should open his own restaurant, one that's exactly like the one from his childhood. Stan is originally hesitant, but she says he should ask Roger for help. That guy's always doing something new. So Stan goes to Roger, who's totally down to help. They go to the bank, where Roger convinces the banker to give them the loan they need to start up the restaurant. Roger then takes point on the construction of the place, even hiring a Laotian chef, which is a bit suspicious. But Stan's too happy to ask questions. His dream is finally coming true. As work on the restaurant continues, Stan and Roger go to a farm to select their fresh produce. Later, Stan returns to see that not only did Roger open the restaurant for business, it's nothing like he wanted. Roger says it's because Stan's ideas were all garbage. He knows how to run a restaurant. They stop their argument to see a cow give birth, as you do, before coming back and fighting again. Roger says that since he's the one that got the loan from the bank, the restaurant is his, and he fires Stan. Stan is beyond depressed. Roger just stole and took a massive dump on his childhood dream, but Francine convinces him to fight back. That's exactly what he does. With a loan from Francine's parents, Stan opens a restaurant right next to Roger, and even steals his chef. The restaurant opens and an opera singer walks in. He eats there and he loves it. This makes other people try it out and they love it too. Stan's restaurant is a hit. Meanwhile, being right next to Stan has put Roger out of business. He has to kidnap a guy to get him inside his restaurant. He tries defaming Stan too, but it doesn't work. So he goes scorched earth and blows up Stan's restaurant, taking his own restaurant out too.
What do you say we make it exactly the same?
How do you mean?
That way, they can both claim their insurances and pay back their loan. The next episode, Spelling Be My Baby, starts with Heiko, Francine's rival, who's forcing her kids Toshi and Akiko to learn music. As she puts it, it's going to help her kids stand out when it's time for college applications. It's also clear that Steve likes Akiko. Francine then goes to Greg and Terry, and their kids speak French. Also, so she can have an edge when it's time for college admissions. Francine realizes that Steve isn't really excellent at anything, and she worries that he's not going to get into college. She panics and says they need to find something Steve excels at. It's a struggle, because Steve kinda sucks at everything, until Francine realizes he's actually really good at spelling. She puts Steve in the school spelling bee, and he wins. Heiko and Akiko meet them at the spelling bee, and Akiko congratulates him. It looks like she might like Steve too, but Heiko and Francine hate each other, saying they're going to put their kids against each other in the National Spelling Bee. Oh boy. Later, when Steve is playing video games, Francine breaks the TV and covers the entire house in words. As she puts it, she talked way too much smack to Heiko, so Steve has to beat Akiko in the Nationals. Steve, overwhelmed by Francine's words being everywhere, gets out of the house to be alone for a while. He finds Akiko there, who left her house to do the same. Relating to each other's frustration, the two of them share a kiss in a surprisingly wholesome moment. In the following days, the two of them win several spelling bees, and both of them end up at the finals. The night before the Nationals, they're on a video call, and Akiko tells Steve to meet her at the same place they shared their kiss. Francine wants to stop him at first, but realizes she's being a tool, and decides to let him go. Steve gets there, only to find a note from Akiko that says she needs to rethink her priorities, and that she's done with him. Fueled by revenge, Steve says he's going to destroy her at the spelling bee.
Excuse me, Mother. I've got some spelling to do.
What he doesn't know is Francine is the one who plays that note there, because she has Akiko trapped in their basement. She's pulling out all the stops to make sure Steve wins. What a psycho. Unfortunately for Francine, Heiko manages to find and break out Akiko just before the Nationals. Akiko makes it on time, and Steve is super mad. He thinks she's the one who dumped him. While the spelling bee starts, Francine and Heiko have a sword fight outside. They're going at it until they realize their kids have made it to the final. During the round, Akiko misspells a word, and Steve is about to win. But seeing how harsh Heiko is on Akiko, he decides that he needs it more than her, and he misspells his word on purpose. Francine is proud of him, and also confesses to kidnapping Akiko. The kids then proceed to spend all day misspelling words for the other one to win. Now that is what I call romantic. Season 9 kicks off with Steve and Snot's testubular adventure. To no one's surprise, Steve and Snot are getting bullied. Afterwards, they both realize prom is coming up, and neither of them have dates. They try to ask Haley for help, but she doesn't want to. So they ask every girl in school and get rejected by all of them. You'd have better chances of winning the lottery than these guys are at getting dates. This is when Steve gets an idea. If they can't find dates, they're just gonna have to make them. That's right, Steve and Snot used some random girl's DNA to clone them so that they could have dates for prom. All moral implications aside, there's a huge problem. The clones come out as babies. After finally putting these babies to sleep, Steve and Snot talk about what the hell they're going to do. Luckily for them, Roger set up a daycare in the attic, and he takes the girls from them. But when Steve and Snot get back to school, they see the girls have aged dramatically. They're now 5 years old. At this rate, Steve realizes that they'll be the same age as him and Snot by prom, and since Roger's taking care of them until then, it looks like they have free dates to prom. Sure, they're going to hell, but they're going to prom first. But when the time for prom comes around, Steve and Snot can't go through with it. They practically raise the girls as their daughters. They agree to just take them to prom as friends. Well, at least Steve does, because Snot takes Steve's daughter, saying he's no quarrels about going to prom with her. So Steve rushes after them to school, hoping to stop Snot. Back at home, Stan realizes the girls are clones, that'll lose his job if the CIA finds out. So he kills one of them and heads out after the other. Steve finds Snot and his daughter and stops them from doing the business, saying she's more than just an object, deserves to be treated with respect. They share a heartfelt moment, but it doesn't really last long because Stan is there to end her. They run away from him and manage to get to safety, but it is no use. Since the clone has reached the same age as the girl she was cloned from, her time is up, and she dies right in front of Steve. He's traumatized, but Stan tells him it's okay, until his clone Dodo Bird dies and he starts crying too.
Be a man and move on with your life. Darren!
Is it just me, or do you think these guys really aren't responsible enough to have the power of cloning at their fingertips? The next episode, Crotch Walkers, sees Steve and his buddies Snot, Toshi, and Barry at their gardening club. Francine tries to join in, but Steve wants nothing to do with her. The gardening club heads off to buy a tomato cage, leaving Francine by herself. Stan comes out to console her, but ends up stepping on a rake, which smacks him right in the family jewels. Oof. They rush him to the hospital, while Steve and the others realize they have no money to buy the tomato cage.
Okay, so Toshi's in.
So they just steal it. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is they loved stealing. They want to do more of it. Meanwhile, Stan is having a terrible time. Not only is his voice super squeaky now, but his family jewels have taken refuge inside of his body. They might not ever come back. While that's happening, Steve and his friends try robbing a candy store, but they get caught. The others manage to get away, but Steve is not so lucky, and Francine goes to the shop to get him. She's super mad, but not because he stole. She's mad because he got caught. As it turns out, Francine's been shoplifting for 20 years and she's never been caught. She says she's going to teach Steve how to shoplift successfully, and Steve thinks that's awesome. What is wrong with this family? So Francine teaches Steve all there is to know about shoplifting, and together they swipe a whole bunch of expensive stuff for themselves and their family. But Stan realizes there's no way they could have paid for all this, and Steve confesses to what they did. Steve and Francine hug Stan, promising never shoplift again. But Francine says they need to have one last heist, and they're going to do it at The Gash, a store with top-notch security. Unfortunately, Steve gets caught and sent to their third-world sweatshop where he's going to be the Gash's slave for the rest of his life. Francine goes to Stan for help, but he's no use without his nugs. So Francine sets out to save Steve by herself. Stan sings a song about it, and his family jewels come back when he's done, returning him back to normal. Meanwhile, after a lot of lying, almost being caught and using one of Stan's grenades, Francine manages to bring Steve home safe and sound. The episode Faking Bad opens with Haley meeting an old friend at a restaurant, and they go clubbing together. One problem with that, Haley doesn't have a fake license, and she can't afford one either. So she asks Steve to make her one, and his fake license is so good, might as well be a real one. Realizing the potential here, the siblings go into business selling fake IDs, and business is booming. I mean, they make a lot of money.
My crotch? I'm looking for my crotch?
In fact, they make so much money that they're threatening Roger's fake ID business, because of course, he has a fake ID business. They don't take him seriously. But they have to take Stan seriously because he's just been assigned the case of catching the new counterfeit kingpin going by the name Gutenberg. I guess it's a fitting name, especially as Steve is Breaking Bad. After getting sidetracked on a recon mission, Stan finally figures out the location of Gutenberg and he heads out to arrest him. Luckily, Haley calls Steve in time. He manages to trick Stan and send him on a wild goose chase. After that, Roger tries recruiting Steve, but he refuses to abandon his sister, until he overhears her talking to her friends about him and realizes she actually doesn't respect him. So he jumps ship to work for Roger and leaves Haley. Yeah, she totally deserved that. Haley tries to forget what she's done, but she feels too guilty and goes to check up on Steve. Roger has him making passports for terrorists, and he's in big trouble. Realizing he's in danger, she calls Stan and tells him what's happening. Stan shows up to save Steve and Roger, and Haley takes the fall as Gutenberg, saving Steve and ending up in jail herself. But Steve uses his fake card master to get Haley out of prison, and the siblings are on good terms again. In the episode She Will Survive, Stan comes home from work, and he's sad. Bullock won't include him in his inner circle. He decides to take it out on Haley by telling her to stop being lazy and start paying rent. With no other choice, she starts working at Roger's bar as a bartender. Stan goes to check on her and realizes he can't let Haley work at that dump until he sees Bullock there. He overhears him saying he really respects men with pocket squares and decides to use that to get into his inner circle. While it doesn't quite do the trick, it does make Bullock respect him a little bit more. Using a bug he plants in some flowers, Stan listens to everything Bullock says and starts implementing it in his life. Slowly but surely, he moves up in Bullock's ranks until he finally does it. He officially becomes a part of Bullock's inner circle. Unfortunately, this comes at a cost. Haley is a drunkard now, and she checks into rehab to get help. Realizing Haley's in rehab, Bullock says they need to take her out because she's classified information.
She must be eliminated. Oh.
So Stan downs a bottle of beer and joins Haley at rehab, where he helps her escape the CIA agents who were there to kill her. So father and daughter get drunk and start running from the CIA. They manage to get away for a while, but end up getting cornered at sunset. This is when Haley says she wrote down every secret Bullock ever told her. And if she dies, they're all going to be released to the public. So Bullock lets her go and kicks Stan out of his inner circle. Stan apologizes for being so harsh on Haley. He says he's proud of her. The episode ends with the two sharing a hug, and it's super sweet. The next episode, Rubberneckers, sees Stan and Francine out on a date night. It's going great, till Francine catches Stan staring at the bartender behind them. She's mad at him now, so he asks his colleagues and Bullock for help. So they teach him about the rubberneck, a technique to stare at other women without anybody finding out. Even though it's disgusting, it works like a charm. Stan spends the whole day at the mall with Francine and doesn't even get caught staring once. They also bring a new couch home, which Roger and Klaus immediately spill red wine on. Later, Stan tries to rubberneck a girl while driving, and he crashes his car. He lies to Francine and his insurance company, saying he swerved his car to save a dog's life. Francine believes him, but the insurance inspector visits the next day, and he's highly suspicious. He says he believes Stan, but he's going to look into the matter. And if he finds any evidence of Stan lying, he's going to be back.
He keeps drinking, but there's always the same amount of milk.
Stan goes to work the next day to find the insurance inspector there. He says he thinks Stan was rubbernecking, but he doesn't have any evidence. So he's going to check Stan's car at the body shop and confirm whether he was doing it or not. Stan realizes he's screwed. He took pictures of the girl, and his phone is in the car. He goes to the body shop, where the inspector finds his phone and the pictures. He's been caught doing insurance fraud, and they send his butt to jail. In jail, Steve comes and visits, and sings a song about how bad he messed up, and how he doesn't need a rubberneck because he already has the perfect wife. At the trial, it looks like Stan is done for. That is until he sends Francine a note, and she shows up looking hot. Every single man in the room rubbernecks her, and Stan uses it as proof for his innocence. As he puts it, his eyes may wander, but his heart belongs to Francine. They all sing a song about it, and have a great time. But Stan really did commit insurance fraud and is sentenced to jail for 6 years. The law is the law, I guess. The episode Permanent Record Wrecker opens with Stan being super hard on Steve for not arranging his CDs properly. Unfortunately, things are about to get hard for Stan himself because Bullock fires him the next day and hires some halfwit who costs half of what Stan costs. So Stan tries to get a job somewhere else. The problem with that is that his CIA work is classified, so it can't be written on his permanent record, and it looks terrible without it. Hell, the CIA even murked the guy who was interviewing him. He's at a complete dead end. Realizing he can't get hired anywhere, even half decent, Stan decides to get a job at the same grocery store that Steve works at. This, as it turns out, is a terrible idea, because Steve gets appointed the assistant manager and makes Stan's life miserable. He yells at him, nitpicks everything he does, and even disregards perfectly fine work. All things that Stan used to do to him.
Oh, that poor mentally disabled man.
I'm not mentally disabled.
Stan gets his revenge by treating Steve like crap at home, before messing up at the grocery store and blaming it on Steve. He gets Steve fired, and he's happy about it, until he realizes it's actually going on his permanent record. He's devastated, and he wants to make it right. So they break into the CIA and try to change Steve's permanent record, only to get caught. Bullock says Steve's permanent record is going to be changed back, but that's when the Stan replacement walks in with a whole cart of loaded C4 that's going to go off in 30 seconds. Using their teamwork from the grocery store, Steve and Stan manage to control the explosion and save everybody. Bullock gives Stan his job back, and he reconciles with his son. At least they got some father-son bonding out of all that mess. The episode News Glances with Genevieve Vance sees both Haley and Steve with once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Haley is going to start working with this reporter, and she aims to educate the masses about Garbage Island, while Steve gets to ask his ed teacher anything he wants anonymously. Unfortunately for Haley, the reporter she's working for is actually just Roger, who wants nothing to do with her story and just wants something that'll get the ratings up. Meanwhile, Steve asks a stupid question, and everybody finds out, turning him into a joke. So the siblings strike a deal. They'll pretend Steve was kidnapped for a week. That way, Haley gets her story, and he gets to avoid the embarrassment at school. I'm sure nothing's gonna go wrong. Haley hides Steve in a cabin and calls Roger to break the story. He does, and it works perfectly. The ratings are up, people hold a vigil outside the Smith household, and Francine is devastated. Unfortunately, that last thing makes Haley guilty, but Roger says they need to do this if she wants viewers for a Garbage Island story. So she agrees to continue. It looks like it's working for Steve too, because the girls in his class show up on Roger's channel and they seem like they're really into him.
Sad. Steve was really cute. I guess I just wish I could have hit that.
Haley finally thinks it's time to report on Garbage Island, but Roger has one more thing to do before this. Accuse Stan and Francine of murdering their son. It works too. The two of them get arrested and taken away. Haley tries to report on Garbage Island, but she can't. She's too guilty. You know who isn't guilty? Roger, who shamelessly keeps pandering to his audience. Haley goes to get Steve from the cabin, but Roger follows her with his crew and accuses her of kidnapping Steve and blaming it on her own parents. With the cops there, Haley has no choice but to make a run for it. Roger then hosts a homecoming for Steve, and everybody's there, including a lot of girls dying to meet him. But he can't throw his sister under the bus, so he confesses the truth. This is all staged, and Haley jumps in, saying Roger was in on it. The crowd turns on Roger, so he makes his escape, and the family is back together again. At least Steve had his 15 minutes of fame, I guess. The next episode, Roger passes the bar, sees our alien buddy having a tough time. With Haley gone, Roger has to run the bar all by himself, and he's struggling. There's too much to do. Doesn't have nearly enough help. Francine says he needs a break, and a guy named Toby even offers to buy the bar. But Roger refuses. The bar is all he has. That is, until the stress finally gets to him and he has a heart attack.
Stop watching me switch characters and call an ambulance!
Now left with no choice, a teary Roger decides to sell the bar to Toby, but only after he promises to keep Roger's vision of the bar alive. With the bar gone, Roger tries living his life to the fullest, but he misses the place too much. So he goes to check on it and sees that Toby has changed literally everything, destroying his original vision. I'd feel bad for Roger, but he did the exact same thing to Stan, so I don't. Anyway, with some advice from Francine, he decides he's going to buy the bar back, until Toby says they're expanding nationwide and wants him to be the poster boy. Roger, as you can imagine, immediately abandons all of his morals and just agrees. He stars in commercials for Roger's Spot and becomes rich and famous. Francine tries talking him out of it, But the fame has gone to his head and he just kind of ignores her. That is, until he sees one of his old customers who quit drinking. While others would be happy here, Roger takes this as an insult and realizes that his bar has lost its soul. So he publicly defames Roger's spot, gets everybody to boycott it, and ruins Toby, meaning he gets his bar back and can go back to doing what he does best, selling alcohol to absolute degenerates. The episode Now and Gwen starts with Francine having a nightmare about her sister Gwen coming over, and rightfully so. Sure, she's hot, but she's also a habitual criminal who's always shows up when she needs to use Francine for something. It all started when Gwen burned down her and Francine's school way back when. She's been a degenerate ever since. Haley says Francine should get rid of her, but Francine says she can't abandon family. This is when Gwen shows up, and when you know it, she's here because she needs Francine to lie to her probation officer. Francine does it too. She'd do anything for her sister. Gwen's probation officer thinks everything is fine with Gwen, so she drives off, and Gwen betrays that trust by immediately setting up a fake phone business in the garage. Haley does her best to convince her mom to stop enabling Gwen, and it looks like Francine might be starting to agree. Well, maybe not, because Francine is still helping out Gwen in all her illegal activities, including the fraudulent sale of a liver.
I don't know what happened. I saw the money, I saw the liver, and I thought, maybe I could have it all.
After Francine and Gwen barely make it home alive after stealing money from some gangsters, Haley has had enough of Gwen and kicks her out. This is when Francine reveals the truth. She was the one who burned down the school, and Gwen was blamed for it. Well, she didn't exactly blame Gwen. You see, Francine was just trying to be cool like Gwen, so she borrowed one of her cigarettes and smoked it in the science lab when the police found the cigarettes. Gwen took the fall for Francine. That's why Francine always covers for her sister. They catch up to Gwen, who's about to set fire to the local school, and Francine and Haley apologize. The sisters reconcile and decide to share a cigarette inside the science room. The school, of course, burns down again, and Francine decides she's gonna take the fall this time.
Please surrender farther away from the still exploding building.
Only for Gwen to end up in jail instead. Gwen's pissed and says she's coming for Francine when she gets out of prison. But hey, at least it won't be anytime soon. The following episode, My Affair Lady, sees Haley get called a loser by a drug dealer because she doesn't have a job. After successfully stealing some weed off of him, Haley is pretty happy, until Roger makes her realize that this is actually an all-time low. So he decides to help by becoming her life coach. He gets her into a job interview at some business firm, and wouldn't you know it, she actually gets the job. On her first day, she meets a super hot guy named Axe Jenkins who gives her the rundown on everyone in the office. Looks like Haley might have a crush. She talks to Roger about her job in Axe, and Roger says she needs to get with him. Not only that, but Roger also says to get pregnant so that he's stuck with her. But Haley does like the guy, so she decides to go along with it for now. That's when their boss announces a company retreat to Belize, and Haley is having a great time on the way. Until she finds out Axe has a wife. Come on. But with a name like Axe, what'd she expect? She goes super cold on him, but he says his marriage is just a formality at this point, that he really likes Haley. That's when Roger shows up at the company retreat as everyone's life coach and conducts a bunch of exercises that bring Haley and Axe closer together. Klaus tries warning Haley about how bad cheating is, but Roger says this is something she needs to do, or she'll be running away from the drug dealers her entire life.
Just go do it already. Oh, and record it. Just the audio. I got plenty of video, short on audio.
So Haley goes over to Axe's room and they start making out until she sees Axe has a tattoo of his wife. And it's Roger. Yeah, basically Roger married Axe for his money, but the only way he gets any is if Axe cheats on him. Haley obviously refuses, but when she gets fired, Roger offers her a 50% cut, so she agrees to do the deed with Axe. Instead of doing that, she exposes Roger to save Axe, destroying his little scheme and saving Axe from having to give away all of his money. She might be broke, but she's not a monster. The next episode, A Star Is Reborn, sees Stan use his CIA tech to hack into a call and win himself and Francine free tickets to Hollywood. When they get there, Francine has a whole itinerary planned out for herself and Stan. But Stan gets noticed by an old actress named June Rosewood, who whisks him away, saying he reminds her of her lover Leonard Zane. She shows him a good time in Hollywood, treating him to food and showing him old-timey movies, before saying she wants him to help her finish shooting Leonard's last movie. Stan is skeptical about the whole thing, but June convinces him he's the reincarnation of Leonard Zane, and he agrees to do it. Things look bad when Francine shows up, but when the director sees her, he decides to cast her in the movie too.
No.
Yes!
Welcome to our mad little circus.
Something June does not appreciate. They shoot the final scene of the movie, and Francine and Stan get ready to go home. But June is heartbroken over Stan leaving, since she thinks that he's her husband reincarnated, and decides to kidnap Francine. Stan chases June to her home, and this is where he learns the truth. June killed her husband when he fell in love with another woman, and she's gonna kill Francine too. Stan chases June and Francine to the docks, but June knocks him out and leaves the two of them to drown in the ocean. But Francine is okay with this because she gets to go out with the man that she loves. Seeing this, June gets jealous and jumps in the water. So Francine and Stan swim around her and hijack her boat. Stan accidentally shreds June with the boat, but the couple doesn't really care, because they're in love. The next episode, The Dentist's Wife, starts with Roger busting out one of his A-list personas, Samantha Kingsbury, who's supposed to be a very rich and posh woman. That's when Francine sees Meredith Fields, the most distinguished woman in all of Langley Falls. Roger feels competitive, so he goes over to talk to Meredith. But she's so charming that Roger somehow ends up taking her order and working at a cafe for a whole month. Now hell-bent on creating a persona that can outshine Meredith, Roger takes Francine to his persona factory, where he's created hundreds if not thousands of outfits over the years. There, he cooks up a persona named Cecilia Takaru and goes to impress Meredith at her book club, and gets thoroughly embarrassed. In fact, it's so bad that he burns down his persona factory and says he's never going to dress up as anybody ever again. Damn. Roger's whole identity is, well, having thousands of identities. Seeing him devastated, Francine makes Roger an emergency persona for him and says he should consider doing some volunteer work. They say it helps lost people find themselves, so he decides to do volunteer work at Meredith's charity, and he meets her there. Meredith, as usual, is super sweet.
Now, isn't that a curious way to look at someone?
And inspires Roger to be whoever he wants to be. So Roger obviously takes it the wrong way and decides to become Meredith. He starts with his hair, and then he borrows Meredith's clothes. She catches him and tries to get rid of him, but he knocks her out and sends her away on a ship. Francine realizes what he's been up to and tries to stop him. So he sends her away on the same ship. Anyone else kinda uncomfortable with how evil Roger can be? Back at Meredith's home, Roger's fully stolen her identity and is even kissing her husband. He's about to give a speech at her gala, but Francine and Meredith show up with the cops, so Roger makes a run for it. After he gets away from them, he decides to give up the persona and go back to being a nobody. But this is when Francine tells him that his own personality is at the base of all of his characters, that he's amazing. This brings Roger back to himself, and they hug. The episode Persona Assistant focuses on how much work goes into Roger's different personas, and he's got a lot of them. In fact, he's so busy that he doesn't even show up in the intro of the show. Stan goes to complain about Roger not having time for important stuff because he's always goofing off, while also showing concern about the growing mass on his forehead. But Roger says what he does is important. Without him, this town would fall apart. Unfortunately for Roger, the tumor on his head becomes huge, and he has to be operated on. He survives, but he's in no shape to continue his persona hopping, so he gives that responsibility to Stan, who isn't taking it seriously at all. He thinks it's going to be a breeze, but he soon finds out that it is not so easy, and it gets too much for him, so he decides to quit. Unfortunately, Stan quitting leads to a series of events that throws the entire town into complete chaos. Seeing this, Stan decides to take Roger's most dangerous persona to stop the violence, Ricky Spanish. But after he takes out the mob bosses, the power takes over and he decides to destroy the town.
I'm sorry, what in the living is that?
Roger, whose tumor has grown into a living thing named Rogu, who he's raising as his child, realizes what's happening and decides to don the only persona that can take down Ricky Spanish, Jeannie Gold. But Roger loses, and Stan is about to end him, until Rogu creeps up on him and slices his throat. But don't worry, it's just the lining of the costume. Stan realizes what Roger does is actually important, and he apologizes, before revealing that Rogu is taking over some of his persona duties to help him. Looks like everything worked out in the end. Top of the Steve starts with Steve and Roger super excited to look at their rain meter, only to find out Stan drank the whole thing. What's more, Stan says he can do whatever he wants because he's the big dog. Steve gets super mad at him, so he and Roger decide to run away to a boarding school. One problem with this, it's actually a girls' boarding school. And since he's the only boy there, he's in high demand. So much so that the principal calls him into her office. Meanwhile, Stan realizes Steve isn't at home and starts missing him, but he doesn't show it. This is when a girl named Spunky Rooster shows up as Steve's replacement and starts living inside their clock. Standard American dad stuff. Meanwhile, the principal makes it clear that she hates Steve and men in general, and she's going to do everything she can to get him expelled. Roger and Steve sit down to have lunch with their roommates Spitz and Babe, who are both lesbians and are into each other. Except they don't actually know it.
Hey, Mr. Stan, what did you mean when you said I was annoying? Does that mean I ask a lot of questions?
Meanwhile, Stan is super annoyed with Spunky, and he gets even more annoyed when she whoops his ass at a game of horse. Back with Steve, the principal says he has to win a study competition to stay in school, so he starts studying. And he realizes he's screwed. This is when Spitz shows up and says Steve doesn't have to win the study competition, he just has to win any competition. So they chose the Battle of the Bands, with Roger, Spitz, Babe, and Steve all participating. After this, Roger realizes why everything is going Steve's way. They're in a spin-off. Steve's the main character. which means he's the big dog now. Back at home, Stan finally breaks down and admits that he actually misses Steve. Well, it took him long enough. Meanwhile, Steve and his band start performing, and they're doing great. But when Steve realizes that if he wins this competition, he'll be stuck in the spinoff forever, he decides he needs to lose. So he and Roger try self-sabotage, but they win anyway. They start running away from the principal and the girls, avoiding any storyline that could keep them there. They end up getting cornered in the room, and to do the only thing they can, they sing the Beatles so the show gets sued. That actually does the trick. They get sent back home, and Steve is reunited with Stan, who is super happy. In the episode Rabbit Ears, Stan is super excited for the night before garbage day because he gets to pick out stuff people have thrown away. Unfortunately, his family hates everything that he brings back, and they're too focused on Rogu, who's grown into a massive baby now. So Stan takes the TV he picked up to the basement and sleeps in front of it, only to be waken up by a mysterious show called the Nighthawks Hideaway. Realizing there's no documented record of the show, Stan goes looking for answers. He goes to the TV guide, who says that the show never existed. But the guy tells him about a meeting that people who claim to have seen the show hold, so Stan goes there to find his neighbor, Tuttle. He begins ranting about his conspiracies about the show, but Stan doesn't believe him, until Stan goes home at night and sees Tuttle on the TV show. Stan breaks into Tuttle's home and steals his notes and begins uncovering the mystery of the Nighthawks Hideaway. It takes over his whole life, and Stan becomes obsessed until he finally finds out how to get in, and boom, he's in the show.
Stan? I remember you.
But when he meets Tuttle, he realizes this isn't a cool getaway. It's a recurring nightmare that makes you forget who you are and everything you came from. What's more, the host, Alistair Kovacs, brutally murders anybody who ruins his show. So Stan and Tuttle make their way out of the hideaway and drive home, only to end up right back in it. It looks like they're trapped in the show forever. I bet this is how the cast of Friends felt. Over the course of multiple reruns, Stan almost forgets about his family. Emphasis on almost, because when he does remember them, he goes haywire, demands to go home. So Alistair makes the show go to break and starts chasing Stan and Tuttle. But they find a way out of the TV, and Tuttle shows it off to stop Alistair from chasing them. Stan gets rid of the TV and is finally back with his family, only to realize that his entire life is now trapped inside a TV, with Alistair Kovacs controlling everything. That was creepy. The episode No Weddings and a Funeral opens with the family hating on and disrespecting Klaus, and he's finally had enough. He decides to leave and says everybody will regret it. We then take a time skip 15 years into the future, and everybody gets invited to Klaus's funeral, though they're not the same people that we remember. Steve is the owner of a tech company, and he's rich. Haley's married to Jeff with a bazillion kids. Roger's come out as an alien and dropped his personas. Francine is married to Steve's friend Toshi now, and Stan is a divorced, broke loser who lives with a cat. Still, the family comes together at Francine's place so they can go to Klaus's funeral together.
You must be the little darlings my daughter's been keeping from me.
A nun comes over to arrange everything, and she's being very pushy about the funeral. And that's because the nun is Klaus. His plan is simple: to make them hold a funeral and feel super guilty about themselves so they can beg for him to be alive again. Just one small problem: the family doesn't give a rat's ass about Klaus. Haley and Steve spend the time reconnecting with each other, while Stan and Francine discuss their failed marriage. Roger finds out the nun is Klaus, but he doesn't care either. Klaus is the definition of irrelevant. They do end up holding the funeral, but none of them really care. And Stan even makes fun of Klaus, which everybody laughs at.
Check this out, guys. I always said Klaus was a wiener.
So Klaus the nun knocks everybody out with sleeping gas. When they wake up, they realize they're all trapped inside Klaus's mind, and he plans to take them out with him. So they start working together to avoid the fire and survive. They manage to stop one of Haley's kids from ending them, and that's when they realize something. They all get along when they make fun of Klaus, and when he left, the glue that held the family together was gone. Klaus cries tears of joy. This is all he wanted to hear. Together, the family make their escape from the house. After that, Steve moves back to Langley Falls, while Francine and Stan get married again. The family is back together, united for their hatred of Klaus. Ghost Dad opens with Stan and his family seeing something horrific on the TV. Stan's dad stole a car, was in a high-speed pursuit with the police, and was gunned down. Everybody's devastated, except for Stan. Instead of being sad, he's playing music with his teenage band like he's not sad at all. In fact, he doesn't even attend the funeral. He's busy playing a gig at a nearby restaurant. That is, until he gets mad at his band member for messing up. But it's not the band member that's really bothering him. It's that his dad died, and Stan never forgave him. So Roger comes up with a plan. They hold a fake seance to give Stan some closure.
Look at the salt go!
Roger?
Fine.
This goes horribly wrong, because Roger actually summons Stan's dad, Jack, and he's trapped inside their house. They all hate it, so they decide to come up with a way to exorcise him, and Jack says he knows just what to do. Somehow, I do not trust this undead fart. They do the ritual, and Jack is gone. Or at least, that's what it looks like. In reality, he's taken over Steve's body. He's using it to do some pretty messed up stuff. I knew it. Stan goes to pick Steve up from school and realizes it's Jack in his body. Jack says he needs the kid's body and kicks Stan out of the car. Desperate to get his son back, he goes to Steve's room and figures out where Jack is headed. He goes to save his son. We find out why Jack took Steve's body. To rob a sports museum. What? A sports museum? You came back from the dead, that's the best that you can come up with? He's about to pull off the heist when Stan and Roger show up. Jack says he's never giving Steve's body back. But when Stan starts complimenting Steve, the kid finds the power to kick Jack out of his body. Stan, Roger, and Steve make it out of the museum, while Jack is still trapped there. The suggestively titled Roger Needs opens with Stan heading to a laser hockey game, and Roger's supposed to go with him as his persona Van Smash. Roger then ditches him at the last second, only to show up to the game disguised as his coworker Dick's new girlfriend, Becky. Stan complains about it later, but Roger tells him not to worry. He has no more persona conflicts in the future. Somehow, I doubt this. Looks like my doubts were correct, because Roger ditches everybody in the family. Klaus, Francine, Haley, and Steve are all waiting for him at some point, but he never shows up. His relationship with Dick has consumed him. So the family agrees to put an end to it by having Klaus Photoshop a picture of Roger, or should I say Becky, cheating on Dick. Stan shows the picture to Dick, who dumps Becky immediately. Roger is sad, but it looks like he's back to his normal self. But he is not. Becky's pain seeps into his other characters, and he's super upset. So the family has another meeting, and Francine knows how to help Roger. She says he should go to Tuscany because it'll magically fix him. Well, that's one of the least crazy things to happen on the show, so I guess we'll just go with it. Francine and Roger go to Tuscany, and Roger says he got over Dick by sleeping with every single man in town. Turns out, this approach did not work, because when he sees Dick with his new girlfriend, his personalities start bleeding into each other.
Yo, Van Smash? What are you talking about? Van Smash?
He starts tweaking out, so Stan knocks him out to keep his cover. Stan puts Roger to bed, but Roger isn't sleeping. He dresses up as Becky and hires a hitman, which is another persona of his, to kill Dick. Bullock turns up and tells the family the hitman must have a target, so they go to stop him. Francine confesses that they were the ones who broke them up, but the hitman doesn't care. He's there to do a job. He traps the family and goes to shoot Dick. This is when Becky tries stopping him, and Roger's personalities fight with each other. The hitman wins, and he shoots at Dick, only for Becky to take the bullet for him and die in his arms. But turns out the whole thing was planned by Roger. He's back to being Van Smash. Ugh. What is wrong with this guy? The next episode, Klaus and Rogu, in Thank God for Loose Rocks, opens with the Smith family getting ready to head out to their annual trip to the Dude Ranch, where Klaus is usually the star. But there's one problem for good old Klaus: Rogu. He joins the family on the trip and absolutely steals the spotlight, turning Klaus into an afterthought. Realizing he can't compete with Rogu's star power, Klaus decides to do something about it. The goldfish lets loose Tequila Joe, the infamously unrideable donkey of the Dude Ranch, and tries to blame it on Rogu. This backfires on him because he's sent out with Rogu to find Tequila Joe. They find him pretty fast, but he kicks them into a river, which sends them down a waterfall. Rogu saves Klaus's life, even though he was a fish in water, and the two begin their trek back to Tequila Joe. Along the way, the two of them bond and become super close. Hell, Rogu even saves Klaus's life from a mountain lion. After this, Klaus realizes Rogu is actually awesome, and they become friends, until Rogu falls into a mine shaft. Klaus abandons him there, saying Rogu would have replaced him and he can't have this. When he gets back, he tells everybody that Rogu died in the river, but confesses the truth to Roger. Roger's not mad. In fact, he says Klaus should have gotten rid of Rogu for good because he's gonna break out of there and come looking for revenge. This is when people start getting shot in the nuts. And Rogu walks in on Tequila Joe, the unrideable donkey. For an alien tumor, this little guy is pretty cool. Rogu's demands are simple: hand over Klaus. Nobody else gets hurt. But the Smiths refuse. Klaus is family to them, I guess, and they won't hand over one of their own. But Klaus ends up going to Rogu himself, saying he doesn't want them to pay for what he did. He apologizes to Rogu, and Rogu prepares to kill him until the alien spawn is attacked by a mountain lion. It's Klaus's turn to save Rogu, and that's enough to make Rogu forgive him.
Klaus still die.
Are you kidding me?
Meaning the family's back together, and they're closer than ever. Gold Top Nuts starts with the Smith family coming back from a disastrous vacation. Why did it suck? Because Stan got a cheap all-inclusive package. They all begin fighting each other over all the bad things they've done to each other. It's because vacation was a total bust. It's about to get a lot worse, because the plane crashes, leaving the family stranded on an island with a lighthouse. They have food, water, and a VHS with an advertisement for Gold Top Nuts. Unfortunately, even a near-death experience like this didn't squash the tension, and they're still mad at each other. So they all decide to try and contact help in their own way. But being stranded at a lighthouse for God knows how long has certain effects on the mind, and they're not good. Soon, the Smith family forgets not only who they are, but what it means to be a human entirely. In their naked confusion, they go inside the lighthouse and find the Gold Top Nuts advertisement. Seeing this as the only proof of human culture, they begin worshipping the ad and start emulating the characters, giving themselves stupid names and wearing ridiculous clothes.
My name is Lighthouse.
My name is Lighthouse.
My name is Ken.
I don't really know if this is funny or horrifying. The family continues this delusion and discovery of humanity until Stan puts a magnetic rock on the TV and breaks it down. So they decide to journey out and conquer other lighthouses with their knowledge of gold-top nuts. Unfortunately, the lighthouse they went to is just a diner, where the family all get their memories back, leaving them completely embarrassed. The Smith family become famous, or rather infamous. They're now known as the Nuts family. They go on a national TV show where all the host does is just make fun of them. So they get up and leave, vowing to never speak of the lighthouse again. But no matter what they do, they can't stop thinking about it. So they have a family meeting, and Francine says she knows why they can't forget the lighthouse. When they got there, they were fighting with each other, and then they forgot everything. So since the answer isn't in forgiving or forgetting, it's in being kinder to each other. With this, the family actually tries Gold Top Nuts, and they love them. American Dad doesn't have a final episode as of right now, but if it did, this one would do a pretty good job of wrapping things up, I think. So that's where we're going to call it a day. That was our recap of American Dad. While there's a lot of this show, with its fair share of dud episodes, it's still one of the staples of American television, and it will always be one of the top animated sitcoms. Now, which episode is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. See ya.